Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We are delighted to have one of our partners, E1 Solutions, with us. Chris Hansen will be presenting on integrating your outside systems with Dynamics 365 Business Central NAV. And as a reminder, we are recording this webinar, and we will post it to our on-demand webinar library for you to review again or share with anyone. And you can find our library under our resources tab on our website. And we encourage you to ask questions during the presentation. So please feel free to type them into the questions box and we will get them answered throughout our webinar. And then we'll also have a Q&A at the end. So now I'm going to kick it over to Chris to kick off our presentation.
Awesome, thank you. And what I'll do at the start here, I'll actually turn my video on so everyone can see me at the beginning here. If you looked at the invite, I look a little bit different than we did on that, where I was a little more clean shaven. But it's middle of winter. I live in Fargo, North Dakota. It's very cold up here at the moment, so that's why I've got the full facial hair going on. But what we're going through on the session, like Angie said, integrating Business Central with your outside systems. We're primarily focusing on our integration platform, SmartConnect. So I'll be walking through that on the session here. For anyone that's attending this live, feel free to throw stuff into the chat or into the Q&A box as we're going through. I'm more than happy to go ahead and spend time answering questions as I'm going through the screens and the different processes. We'll also have Q&A time at the end for anyone that wants. And yeah, if you haven't heard of SmartConnect before, if you haven't seen it before, I'll be kind of illustrating all the different ways we work. Well, not all the different ways, but a good amount of the ways that we work with Business Central in terms of how we can get that data migrated in or integrated in, synchronized, etc., or out from Business Central as needed with your systems. So with that, I'll go ahead and start going through. I don't have many slides. I promise you it's like 4 or 5, and the rest is actually showing live real product demos, actually running data into Business Central. We can kind of see how that works for everyone. So the agenda for today, again, the first thing we're going through, just what is SmartConnect? So if you don't have any idea what it is yet, we'll be covering this, the general ideas behind it, giving you an idea of how that connects to Business Central, to other systems, what exactly you can do with it. We'll run through a few basic examples that we've come across, both with the Novia customers and other customers we've had where the general needs that they've had where they've implemented SmartConnect as a solution, where it kind of fits on there. Point 3 is the main demo around that. So I've got a few different demos we'll walk through. I'll show both the product in action, which means seeing that data move around to different locations, and then I'll also show the information, how it's set up on the back end as well. Not actually getting into pricing today. Sorry, I didn't adjust my agenda fully for this particular one. Pricing, if there's any questions on that, and Novia and members of our team can help offline after this particular call. And then finally, Q&A at the end. As I mentioned, chat, Q&A box, use it anytime during the session. Don't have to wait for the end on this one as we go through. So if you haven't heard of SmartConnect, haven't seen it before, SmartConnect is our integration platform. When I say platform on there, what I mean is it's going to be your hub for anything you set up when you want to go ahead and in there use it to migrate your data, set up ongoing integrations that your users go ahead and manually push integrations from one location to another. We have both an on-premise version of SmartConnect and a cloud-based version called smartconnect.com. Everything that I cover on this session today is going to apply to both versions of SmartConnect. As I'm showing a couple different demos, I'm going to be showing integrations running from the on-premise client as well as integrations running from smartconnect.com, just to kind of showcase that they're the same solution. They're the same solution, just slightly different on the user interface in terms of how you set anything up. Now, when we're looking at SmartConnect, if you haven't looked at it, kind of worked with it before, the two main parts to SmartConnect, or the main part in SmartConnect, is when you build your integrations, how you tie those together. And that graphic on the right really gives a good high-level idea of how to set that up. So the very first block on there, the top block, as well as the final bottom block on there is your data source and your destination. So your data source is where you want to pick that data up from, and your destination where you're sending it to. So we work with Business Central, both in the cloud and on-premise, earlier versions of Dynamics NAV, obviously text and flat files, SQL, and a handful of other connections that you'll see in that grid there. Same thing for our destination is we work with a variety of dedicated connections to those systems, and we also have a generic connection that lets you build out integrations to other platforms as long as they have an API we can interact with. So picking that data up, sending it to another location is a very simplified way of saying what SmartConnect does. Where we have a lot of the value and where you can really utilize SmartConnect is the middle two blocks in terms of how you want to pick up that data, how you want that integration to trigger, whether it's real time, whether it's on a schedule, whether you have your users actually manually running them. We provide all those different options there. And then what we do within the integration, that transformation section, because if you've worked with integrations before, it doesn't matter what integration tool you used or if you've tried to sync up different systems together, one thing you'll quickly realize is no two systems handle data the same way. It's very rare where you can just directly map your fields from one location to another. You normally have to do some sort of transformation or translation on that data as it's passing through, and that's what we allow you to do in SmartConnect. Now, with that high-level overview of SmartConnect, the next question we run into quite frequently is who actually needs SmartConnect or who needs a data and like an integration tool in general. So kind of 5 main points I've got here on who might need SmartConnect. One is any customer, any person, company that needs to move, create data. It's a very generic statement, but if you have data in more than one system, so you might have Business Central or NAV as your main financial system, you could have a CRM environment, might have SQL, might have some flat files, any environment where you have data in multiple locations, you need to move it to another location, that's a need for SmartConnect. Breaking that down, top right, customers using spreadsheets. This still one of the most common things is a user has a file they need to get uploaded to Business Central or elsewhere. Allowing that to be as flexible as possible, allowing that to be as easy as possible for the end user is part of the driving requirement around it. Eliminating duplicate data entry. Again, if you have anyone in your company entering the same information in more than one location in the same manner, it's a good time to go ahead and eliminate that, have that data entered in one location, and then have SmartConnect pick that up and process it and keep your data in sync. If you have bad data or if you have multiple spots along your business process where users interact with the data themselves, anytime a person is working with data, manually entering in information, it's an opportunity for bad data to work its way into the system. That's a good excuse or a good reason to implement it there as well. And then finally, kind of tying everything together, it's keeping multiple systems in sync. So that might be your Business Central and your CRM, could be a ticketing help desk in your Business Central. If you have to do invoicing off of it, could just be an old on-premise SQL system in NAV, whatever the case might be. If you've got more than one system to sync up, we can use that with our ongoing integrations. Now, enough of the slides. I'm not a huge slide person. I'd rather show how SmartConnect works. So I have a few different demos to walk through as we're going to be looking at this. The first one is going to be more of a simple scenario. So I'm going with, I have a user that's got a flat file of data. We need that uploaded to Business Central. After we upload it to Business Central, I might want to make changes to that integration, or I might want that user to be able to upload it in a different manner. So we'll walk through that and show first how easy it is to run the original integration, but then also how flexible and streamlined it is when we go in, actually make changes, maybe add some fields to it, change around some mapping, and then run that integration in a different manner after we've updated it. So first things first, let's flip out of here and get to my desktop. So I'm going to be showing a few things. This first one, I'm going to be working with our on-premise SmartConnect client. Again, I mentioned that it doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter if we're using on-premise or SmartConnect.com. In either scenario or in either sense, this is going to function in the same way. It's just going to be a slightly different interface that we're working with. So I've got my Business Central client open. I'm using Business Central Online. Again, same thing would apply if we were using NAV or Business Central on-premise. But my first integration is I'm going to have a worksheet or flat file. It's just got some basic invoice data in here. So I wanted to open this up, show you what I'm working with so we can actually verify this data after we ran it into the system. So it's a pretty simple data entry for this first one. Don't have many fields on here. I've titled it My Invoices, modified it earlier today with what I've made changes on. And for this first one, I'm going to show kind of the most basic integration we could do is we have this flat file here. We just want to run an integration in SmartConnect to get this data uploaded. So what this should do is it should create two separate invoices for me. I've got invoice or entry 1 and entry 2 for my reference, so we can identify those later on. Just ordering some of the basic items that are in my sample Business Central company. I'm providing the pricing on this rather than letting it default. So that's the data we're working with. We're going to come back to this because we're going to make changes, but I just want to show you that this is running initially here. So I'll close that down and we'll actually look in SmartConnect for this very first integration. Now, I'll dive into what the different menus do in a moment, but I wanted to show you this actually running, show that it's moving data, and then we can kind of take it apart on here. So the only thing I want to talk about so far right now is the fact that we're on our integration page. We can see all the different integrations that we've set up. I've got them into different groups, so it's easy to narrow down. The integration we're working with on this particular case is going to be uploading the invoices. So rather than going ahead and opening it up to edit it or do anything else, I'm just going to say, all right, run integration. It's going to ask me if I'm sure I want to run it. And what it's going to prompt me for is the file I want to process. So I've already got this pointed at that file that we had open that I showed you just a minute ago. So I'm going to point that at sheet 1 of that Excel workbook. I'm going to click OK, and that's going to kick off my integration to upload the data. Now, at this point, we only had 2 records in there. We had 2 separate invoices. Those both ran through successfully. So if I go and verify that in Business Central, I want to make sure that that data is actually present. It's there in what we're looking for. So I'm going to flip back to Business Central. We'll take a look at my sales invoice. And I'm going to sort this by my posting date because my last 2 in here should be the ones I was working with. So the final 2 on there, I clicked on something I shouldn't have, but the final 2 on there were for Disney Enterprises and One Solution. These were the 2 that I should have just uploaded. If I go ahead and open this up, what I should see on my header is my reference should either be entry 1 or entry 2, and then we should see some of that sample data across the bottom there. So there's our entry 1. If I scroll down, we've got our Athens sample data and so on. And it uploaded based on the few fields that I had provided in my file. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to expand on it a bit. So integrations running invoices, which is great. This is where I want this one to go, but I want to add some fields onto it. For my detail section, I actually want to provide a location code in the file. So we're going to modify the integration to handle the location code as well. And let's say that my users also want to be able to provide a line discount amount for any particular line. So they want to be able to provide that. We'll do it at the line discount percentage on there as well. So what we'll do from this point is I'll go remove these 2 invoices from here. We'll flip back to the source file. We'll flip back to SmartConnect, and I'll show you kind of how the integration hangs together, how it's built on the back end, and then also how easy it is to modify it as we're adding additional fields into there. Now I could do this with any other fields as well. Let's go ahead and we'll map something to our external document number as part of the process here as well. So let's remove this one. And I'll go ahead and remove the other one that just got brought in as well. So I've got a couple in here. Let's make sure that any of my latest invoices are removed. All right, I had a couple because I have it creating new ones each time, and I must not have removed the others prior to this call. So that should be cleaned out. There's nothing for my posting date in January here. Let's go back and take a look at that data. So what I'm going to do is, first thing first, I'm going to fire up the original file again. So we'll open up my invoices. I had just named it like this. And what do we say? For the line items, we wanted to do, let's say we want to provide location as well. And this other one, we're going to do the discount, and we'll say discount percent, name it as such. Nice thing with SmartConnect, you don't have to name it. You know, working with your source data, your fields don't have to match the Business Central fields for your destination. They can be whatever you want. I'm also going to go ahead and add in a field in here and just say that's our external, we'll just call it external number. So we've got that. Now my external document number, I'm going to be really generic on here. I'll put in some data from Excel 01 and from Excel 02 to make that unique. And I'll come back in later on and handle the location, the discount percent. I won't fill these all in quite yet, but I do know some of the sample locations. I believe they use like blue, silver, green, etc. We'll just plug this in here and we'll give some discounts as it's going in. So I'll save that. I'm going to close down my file. This is where my data is coming from. Again, this example is just of an end user. They've got a flat file. They want to be able to plug this data into Business Central. So with that being updated, I'll close that down and we'll take a look at SmartConnect. So I've updated my file. I've got new columns, new data that I want to upload that I didn't handle before now. We're going to show how we can go ahead and kind of tie that together when we want to send that through to Business Central. So in order to do that, we need to know how SmartConnect builds out an integration because all you've seen so far is me just running the existing integration on here. Now, instead of just running it, first I'm going to go ahead and modify this one and add our new fields to it. But in order to do so, I want to make sure that my data is actually picking up the new columns I've added in. So if you think back to the original image I showed kind of on how SmartConnect hangs together, everything, the first step is the data source, the data we're going to integrate. Second step is the transformation, what actually occurs in this integration that we have right here that I've named BC invoices. And then finally, it's the destination and where the specific fields are mapped. So the first thing I want to do is I want to take a look at my data source, where I'm pulling the data from. In my case, I'm pulling it from an Excel file. And I want to go ahead and look at this one. I just named it invoices from Excel and make sure we can pull this in. So if I open this up, if I preview it, what I want to see is my new columns I've added in here. So as I can see, I can see my new external numbers added on there. We've got location, discount percent. That's all visible. So I just wanted to confirm we're seeing that data. If we can see it, that means we can use it on the integration. While I'm here on the data source section, this example is just made use of, pulling from an Excel file. In a few minutes, we'll look at, pulling from another full system, like from customer engagement or from CRM, and syncing that to Business Central. But there really are a wide range of sources we can connect to. So just thinking about different files, we can work with Excel, text, CSV, XML, really any sort of flat file, we can read that in. We can also read it from a directory or an FTP site. So if you don't want to point it to a specific file and rather wanted to point that at just a general directory and watch for any files that get dropped in there, we can handle that as well for reading in data from a flat file. And then additionally, when I mentioned that graphic and all the different systems we can connect to, we can pull data from those as well. So we can pull data from SQL, or you could pull information in from your CRM to send to Business Central. In this case, we're starting with the simple flat file, and then we're just going to work our way up from there after we update our integration. But the data source is where we configure all those different options in terms of how you want your integration to, or what data you want your integration to work on. So we saw our new columns in our data source, so that means I can go ahead and modify this particular integration. So I'm just going to highlight it and click open, and it's going to pull it open for us here. Now I'm going to minimize these windows so it's a little bit easier to read to start with. But again, referring back to our graphic, any integration we set up is really just a data source and a destination, where we're pulling that data from and where we want to send it to. So if I look at my data source, I shouldn't have to change anything on here. I could preview it again if I want. And once again, it's pulling in our data that's got the new columns on there. So that should be good to go. And then on the destination side, I should see where we're sending it to. So in this case, I'm pointing this at Business Central. We're using their OData endpoints. So just a quick aside on how we interact with Business Central or how we interact with NAV is we send everything through one of their APIs. We make use of their page services, specifically the OData endpoints for those page services. And if you're not technical at all, I won't spend too much time on this, but I do want to talk about a few benefits of why we do that. One reason we do this is, one, we interact with OData because it's the most up-to-date and it's the fastest protocol in terms of how you integrate with NAV or Business Central. And then secondly, we use the page services because those reflect what you see on the screen, either on the user interface for NAV on-prem or BC on-prem or online. What you see on that window, like if you open up a customer card or in our case, an invoice card on here, we'll work with that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I read the question. I'll answer the question in one moment. We work the same way as if you were entering that data through that user interface. So the same logic you hit in the Business Central interface, we get that same logic going through their page services on here. So we can't import bad data into there. So I'll look at the field mappings on here in just a moment, but a question did come through on, when using Business Central as a data source, does it inherit Business Central permission sets, or will SmartConnect have its own permission sets to limit certain tables from being queried? Great question on there. When you're pulling data from Business Central using SmartConnect, and I'll actually show this on here, is we have to set up a connection to any system that we want to pull data from first. So if we're connecting to Business Central and I've got this connection set up, the connection to any system generally runs under one authentication. So it's either under one user, or in this case, it's running under one registered app through Microsoft's Azure AD. What that means is when the connection is set up, SmartConnect will have whatever rights the user or the app that's set up to connect as would have, which generally is going to have enough rights to pull anything out from Business Central or anything out from any other system you connect to. What you'll want to do within SmartConnect is actually set up user security to limit particular users from either being able to create new data sources, so prevent them from creating new data sources from Business Central, like from payroll tables, or from anywhere else that you might not want them writing their own queries from. So commonly, you'll split security, only have a couple of users that could, actually create new integrations or create new data sources, and the rest of the users would only have, the end users would have like the run integration permissions. So they could come in here, run an integration, fix up errors that occurred, and so on and so forth. So great question. If you have any other questions, feel free to put them through the Q&A. But yes, excellent question on that. So flipping back to where we were on the destination side of it, pointed out we work with the OData connection. For this integration, we're working with invoices. So as you can see, I've got both my sales invoice and then my sales lines on here. So we kind of break a transaction out between the header and the lines. Now for the header, we added in an extra field like that external document number. So I'm going to highlight that line, click map on here. And what we're going to see is it's going to open up our field mapping window. So this is where we end up with full control over how you want to map that data from one system to another. Now in my case, I've made this example fairly straightforward. So a lot of my fields are mapped directly from my Excel file, which is on the left, to the Business Central fields over on the right. So you can see my reference field is mapped to your reference. This is the name of the field in Business Central. Dates are all coming across, salesperson to the code, etc. I cannot see the external document number right at the moment. So let me go ahead and just search for that. So that should narrow it down here. So what I'm going to do for this is drag and drop my document number over to the mapping here. So again, I'm showing the on-premise version of SmartConnect. SmartConnect.com is very similar to how this is set up. We don't have drag and drop in the web client, but the way you do the mapping is similar. You just use a drop down on the side rather than a drag and drop for this. But the whole idea is we match your source fields up. In this case, we added external number, so I'm putting that on the header. If there was anything else I had to map on the header, I could add that in here as well. Let's flip to the line item because I did add a couple things on here. When I open the line item section for the sales lines, I should see location, I should see the discount amount, etc. So I found location without filtering down. Like I mentioned, I can use my drop down over on this side and set it rather than doing drag and drop. Let me find the discount field as well. And we will add each of these fields that we've added to our source right into the mapping. So with doing that, that's as easy as it is to go ahead, maintain an integration, add fields that we need to it. Now, obviously, I've kept this fairly straightforward for a demo like this in the sense that the fields I added didn't have to have any work done to them. And what I mean by that is I didn't have to translate that data from how it's stored in my source data to how we have it in the destination. If we did need to do that, that's what our additional columns option allows us to do in SmartConnect. So again, referencing back to that first kind of high level image I showed, that one of the middle grids is how we transform the data that comes through. That's what we do under the additional column section. So if we need to look up data from SQL, if we need to look up data from Business Central or NAV as we're sending it in, if we need to translate that data and convert it from maybe a numeric value to a text value or vice versa, or anything else you might need to do as part of that process, we can handle with the additional column. And we try to set that up so our interface lets you manipulate that data, lets you transform it as it's being passed from point A to point B, and you don't have to use, you don't have to have a user try to, quote unquote, fix the data before they upload it. If it's always going to have to be transformed in some manner, set that up as a process within your integration, and then let our tool do the work for you. I'm on that. So that's what allows us to go ahead and work with, imperfect data as we're moving it from one location to another. So I'm going to save this as well. And finally, I'm going to save the overall integration. Now, we've made the changes to that integration. I could go ahead and find it in here and I could rerun it from the client again like I did, but that's just one way our user could manually upload the data. The other way of doing it is either, I mentioned we could do like a folder data source or like an FTP site where we just drop the file in there and wait for it to be processed on a scheduled integration. The third option I haven't mentioned yet is specifically, working with user uploads. If they have to manually run something, we have an Excel add-in that would let our user run it directly from Excel. So I'm going to open this original. I'm going to open up my original document again, back to my invoice on here. Open this up, and what I've got loaded in here is what we call our Excel add-in. Now I can go ahead and tie this Excel add-in to my SmartConnect installation. Or I can tie it to SmartConnect.com if we're using the online version. And the idea of it is we let the user push their integration from their Excel workbook. So the great thing about this is if you have 10 different users doing data upload, maybe 15 different users all doing different data uploads, they can have their own workbooks that are allowing them to upload whatever data they might need. So whether it's journal entries, invoices, just new employee records or vendor or customer updates, you can create an integration to any of those areas you need in Business Central, have an integration for them, and then tie them out to their Excel workbooks and let them do their Excel add-in from here. We can actually run this map across or run this integration. And what we should see is if I update this, let's say, well, let's go ahead and order, 100 mobile pedestals. I don't know what we do with that many, but with the higher amount of order on there, we'll get a 20% discount on that. I can change my data in the sheet. I could add more lines. I could add more invoices if I want, and I can go ahead and just run the integration from here. And this is going to kick off our add-in and actually process it through SmartConnect without the user having to have the SmartConnect client open, without having to have them logged into that. They can do it from the comfort of their workbook. Now, there is still security around this. What I didn't show is you do have to set up this add-in. So the user has to have a user account in SmartConnect. They tie it to that with the service settings, and that's what gives them permissions on what integrations they can run. But this does remove the hassle of having to actually log into the application to get the integration to upload in the first place. So this is going to process. We've changed the data. I've actually screwed something up on here. I didn't even notice that, and nobody commented on the Q&A or the chat, is I put in the location of green with too many E's, and obviously that didn't work. I actually got an error on here, which I didn't intend for, but this is fine. So if you try to run an integration, like I said, since we're going through their services, we encounter the same logic that you would if you were entering it on the interface. So it's actually telling me my location code doesn't exist, and obviously I can't type and talk at the same time. So let's remove that extra E, and I'm going to go ahead and reprocess this particular line that failed, or this document that failed on here. So let me rerun just this one, and I'm expecting this to be much more successful, uploading that with a valid green location. So there we go, we got run successfully with that updated data. So let me close that down. Let me close this down here. And what I should see when I flip back to Business Central is it took me more than one attempt, but my two different invoices should have ran in, and the one where I updated it to run 80 of them or whatever the case might be, we should see that reflected on our entry here. So I think I did this on the Disney Enterprise one. You can see our external document number we've got from Excel 2. This one did not happen to be the correct one. This was just the swivel chairs. Let me go back, exit that. Let's look at the last one I brought in from Excel 01. So that was the new field we added on here. And then we can see blue, silver, green to correct the entered green for this one. And then I updated it to 100 quantity, my line discount of 20%, et cetera, et cetera. And that data all flowed across. So this is kind of wrapping up the first half of the demo where I'm just showing an end user and what it might look like if they're manually running integrations. Started with this because that is the most common denominator across all our customers we work with, is they've got some form or another, they've got some sort of file they need to upload to Business Central or elsewhere in SmartConnect. And I just wanted to show you, when an end user would see if they were running the integration, what you might see or your tech team might see if they were updating or maintaining an integration, and how to set that up in SmartConnect, and kind of how that all fits together in terms of being able to build it, maintain it, that end users run it from wherever they want. So that's one scenario. The other scenario is, or there's a lot of scenarios, but the next one I wanted to show is, let's move away from flat files, right? Let's move away from just the plain old, I have a file, I need to upload it to Business Central, and let's flip more to, I need to keep these systems in sync. So I want to keep my Business Central environment synced up with one or more other environments that we're working with, or one or more other systems we're working with here. So commonly what we get requests for is to tie Business Central either to a CRM, whether it's a Microsoft CRM or Salesforce, or we get requests to tie Business Central to like another SQL Server system, or maybe like an e-commerce platform or so on. So this part you can interact with if you want. I have a demo set up that starts with bit.ly SC1 Demo. So if you want to, you can actually, anyone on the live call, if you're watching this on the recording, obviously you're not going to see the same results, but if you're watching this on the live presentation, feel free to put this in your browser. If you've got another screen, throw that in there, bit.ly SC1 Demo. And when you put this URL in there, when you go ahead and navigate to it, what it's going to bring you to is a very simple kind of quote unquote e-commerce screen. So this is just a custom form we've set up to serve as a stand-in for another application, where either you might take orders from, you could collect any number of information on this. In our case, it's very stripped down. We're just asking for first name, last name, company name, and what you want to order from here. So the idea is whatever we put on here, this is going to save to a backend SQL environment, and SmartConnect is going to pick this data up and actually create the needed records in our Business Central environment, and then also a CRM environment that I'm using as well. So again, we're flipping from looking at flat files to looking at how we keep multiple systems in sync. So on here, I'm going to go ahead and enter in part of my name here. I'm going to change it up a bit because I've done this demo before, so I'm going to do different versions of my name. My company, I run out of good ideas, so I'm just going to call it E5 Solutions and hope I haven't used that company before, but that's what I'm going to be looking at for myself. And for what I want to order, there's not a huge amount of selection on our site. Apologize for that, but it's what we've got for right now. So I'm going to go ahead and put in 5 unicycles, and we'll grab a handful of flat tires to go with that. Now, what's going to be happening here? There's going to be less to see from the SmartConnect interface because a lot of these integrations are set up to run automatically. What is going to happen is when I save this, we've got SmartConnect integrations running on the back end that are going to do a handful of different things. So from this first point, from the moment we save it, we have a real-time integrations triggering off of the table that gets updated by this form. And what those real-time integrations are doing is they're creating a customer in Business Central based off the company name I provided there. It's creating, can't remember off the top of my head, either an order or an invoice, again, off the line items I entered in under that customer. And then it's creating the matching records in CRM initially. So it's creating an account in CRM, it's creating a contact with my first and last name I provided, and then it's creating that invoice over there as well. So this window being saved is kicking off all those SmartConnect integrations on the back end to kind of start this process on how SmartConnect can be used to sync different systems together. Now, what I should see when I go to sales, if I go to customers, and if I filter this list of customers down to stuff that was modified today, we've got a couple in here. I've got my E5 Solutions. I've got a KJ LDFN. That was not me, so I'm assuming somebody else put that in. If you did, throw something in the Q&A or chat so I know it's from one of you and not another random person that stumbled into the demo. But in any case, I'll work with mine because I know this came from me. If I open up this particular customer, I've got E5 Solutions in here. It looks like this may have existed before because I've got 2 different invoices on here already rather than just the one I expected. But as you can see, we don't have much information for this yet. So this address info is something we're going to populate in our CRM environment and actually show SmartConnect automatically picking that up and sending it back in here. So I know most of this presentation has been focused on moving data into Business Central, but we can also use Business Central as a source as well. So to show that, let me just add a new invoice on here for E5 Solutions. I'm going to call this from BC. Just call it from BC Demo. Again, I'm very good with coming up with stuff on the fly. Make sure we're working with today's date. I'm not going to do a lot for the line items. What I'm going to look for is something that wasn't on the website there. When I did it, a performance bicycle, let's go ahead and do 5 of those, and we'll call that good. Just a very basic invoice I'm going to create on here. Now, that's just standard Business Central, but again, what we're doing behind the scenes here is when I go ahead and create this invoice, I have a SmartConnect integration once again, triggering off of any new integration or any new invoice, that gets created in Business Central, and that's sending it out to a different system. In this case, it's sending it out to our CRM environment. So apologies, I'm going to flip locations one more time. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at all my accounts on here. Let's look at active accounts. I'm going to search for E5. Oh, cannot type. Let's try to spell this correctly. We've got E5 Solutions. So once again, switching environments, but we can see our SmartConnect integration from our initial entry on that web form. We had an integration bring that across. If I open up E5 Solutions on here, what I'd like to focus on to start with is just the address portion of this. There's gonna be a lot of information on the screen, but let's focus on just the left-hand side for this particular account. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna enter an address in here. I'm actually gonna use my old address from Moorhead. No longer live here. No thanks, won't update that. We'll stick with Moorhead here. Let's go ahead and add Suite Z for that, just for fun. Change my address information, and I'm actually gonna change my account type to customer and make sure we save this. So why I'm doing this is because I mentioned we can use SmartConnect to sync up separate systems together without us having to manually run any integration. What I've got here is we have an integration looking at the account or account entity in my CRM. And if any changes occur on that, it's automatically going to fire off an integration to run and send that data to Business Central. So because I updated my address information and updated that, and because I set my relationship type to customer, my integration was filtered to make sure we only would sync customers up. By flipping that, adding the address information and saving it, that should have triggered a SmartConnect real-time integration to run on the back end to go back and actually update the address on the customer that corresponds to this. So what I should see, if we flip back to Business Central and I go back to the main customer card here, oh, actually it updated without me even having to refresh. That was fairly cool. You can see the address I plugged in there, the extra address 2 that I entered in Suite Z, that all fed across as I expected it to. So that is showing a real-time integration that was running from the account to the customer record between 2 separate systems to go ahead and generate that data. And I didn't have to do anything special as the end user, didn't have to click any other buttons, that just fired on the back end there. So we're gonna switch back to CRM for just a couple more points here. And the final one being, or one of the last ones being, my new invoices that I'm creating on here. So I should have some new invoices. Let me actually refresh this. I'm not sure if I'm seeing my latest one or not. Just want to make sure anything that's came across from Business Central have been picked up on here. There we go. That's the one I was looking for. Is the last one I built manually, the one that was for the 5 performance bicycles. I said from BC for the reference. That's the one that, once again, my automated integration is picking up, sending across. And I know the view isn't exactly the best, but I've got performance spikes. I've got 5 of them in here. When I'm looking at it, this is exactly what I've entered in my Business Central environment. So that's showing, data flowing both directions between Business Central, and in this case, Dynamics 365 Customer Engagement Sales Hub, or just CRM as I refer to it. Showing data flowing bi-directionally on that. Now, everything I've shown to this point has been one record syncing to its same type of record in the other system. So what I mean by that is if I updated an account in here, it matched to a customer in Business Central. If I created an invoice in Business Central, it matched to my invoice in CRM. What we can do beyond that is SmartConnect isn't limited to tying those same types of records together. So for this last data that I entered in, this performance bicycle, I actually had more than one integration configured to push this data to CRM. So the first integration made the invoice. There was a second integration that is looking for specific item types. And if it fits in one of those criteria, if it passes the criteria I set up, it will actually create a related activity to go along with this invoice. So not only was creating that one invoice in Business Central triggering to make the invoice inside of CRM, it also triggered to create this phone call activity that is set up for a week after today when the invoice was created, creates a separate activity that says, all right, go ahead, call this person. They ordered performance spike, go ahead and set up, try to upsell it for a care package on there. So the specific thing it's creating in CRM isn't the important point. The important bit of that is you can use your integrations to kind of trigger off your workflow or use one integration or one starting point to create different sets of data in different systems as your business process requires. So that was, again, I didn't show much or any of SmartConnect on this half of the demo. The setup for these integrations is very similar to the initial setup that I showed with the flat file piece of the integration, but I wanted to show the integrations running automatically without requiring that user input, because we can use SmartConnect, for those flat file uploads you may need. We can use SmartConnect for these multiple systems that have to be synced together and automatically have that data flow back and forth. And the final bit we can use SmartConnect for is connecting to a system that we may not have a dedicated connection for initially, but we can connect to their API that they provide. So I'm going to take just the last couple minutes, handful more minutes, like 3-4 minutes, talking about how we can connect to different APIs, and then I'll bring it back around for any questions, Q&A session on there, when I can answer any questions you may have for me. So I'm actually going to flip back to the on-premise client for this, because I think it kind of illustrates, I've got something built out in here that kind of illustrates what I'm talking about. When I go to the connection tab of SmartConnect and I want to connect to a new system, I'll have to create that connection, whether we're in .com or on-premise, and choose from one of our selected connectors in here. So whether it's SQL, Business Central, CRM, etc., we can choose from there. However, there are a couple in here that are not standard connectors. We've got a connection for ShipStation on this particular one, and a connection for ConnectWise. Again, if you're not sure what either of those do, that's not the point of this overall. The point of it is the fact that we've built these out with our standard API connector, and they'll slide into SmartConnect just like a standard connection for the end user once they're complete. So like for ShipStation, you may have seen one of their commercials online up to this point. They seem to be everywhere now. They handle printing labels across whatever carrier you're working with to ensure your packages get shipped to where you need them to go. We've done a few projects with them, and I've done a couple demos off this particular machine that use their API. So that's actually built through a standard REST service on here. When I click on my REST API, so it's not a standard connector. It's something we've built from the ground up, where we go ahead and say, all right, these are your methods you work with. This is how you pull data from this API. This is how you send data to it. Once that's defined, that then works like any standard connector in SmartConnect. And that's where we see more and more clients heading, towards is working with these different small, very specific tools or platforms that do one job very well, like ShipStation does the printing for any shipping you need. It's a very dedicated, specific tool on there. But it still needs to be integrated or tied to your Business Central or to maybe your CRM or anywhere else. And with our REST connector, we're able to set that up, and we're able to build those connection points out and treat it just like a standard connection. As you can see in my integration list on here, I've got ShipStation and Business Central. I actually worked to put together different templates for that are sending data back and forth between those two environments. So that's kind of the end point of this whole presentation, is by using that opens up the flexibility from what you've seen, right? Specifically showed, Excel files, and specifically showed Business Central and CRM to kind of tie SmartConnect into anything else you might be using, and you need to integrate that to Business Central. So that kind of ends my product demos. I've got maybe 1 or 2 more slides on the wrap up here. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A section or in the overall chat window. I know I've had Angie's been watching that while I've been talking here. But yeah, we've got a few more minutes for anyone else that wants to go through questions. So while I'm waiting for any questions to come in, there is my colleague that wasn't able to be on this call, Alicia, from our team. She works very closely with Innovia. The next slide actually has some of her contact information on there. Between Innovia and us, we've got different blogs, knowledge base articles, templates, plenty of resources across our 2 teams for anyone that has some questions for any questions you may have on how SmartConnect functions or how it would fit into your business. And again, we do offer different trainings, both with Innovia and their team, are definitely trained up on our product and can help any of you out as well. So I'll flip it over to the contact side for Alicia. Again, she unfortunately couldn't be on this particular call, but she works very closely with Angie and with the entire Innovia team with them on anything. So if we have any questions, send them on through. I'm not seeing any right now. Otherwise, yeah, I'll just sit here and wait for something to come in.
Thank you, Chris. While we are waiting, I just wanted to let you guys know that we do have more events coming up, and you can learn more about all those events at innovia.com/events. And we do have our training workshop page up with some workshops as well as previous workshops. If you're interested in requesting one of those workshops, you can visit innovia.com/workshops to find the workshop that fits your role. All right, Chris. Well, I don't see any questions coming through. Like
Okay.
Chris said, if you have any further questions that you want to talk to our team about or E1, feel free to give them a shout out and they'll be happy to address any of those questions with you and your team members. So I just want to thank Chris for presenting today, and for everyone on today's webinar, or if you're watching on demand, we thank you for taking the time out to join us. Thank you, Chris.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity, Angie. Again, thank you all for being on here as well as we went through it.
All right, and also, if you haven't heard our latest Innovia Conversation podcast, we have a library of podcast episodes for you to listen to, and you can learn more on our podcast page, and that's innovia.com/podcast. So browse through our selection and subscribe so you'll get notified when those new episodes air. And don't forget to check out our conference page, innovia.com/conferences. Our customer conference is coming up on May 4th and 5th at the University of Notre Dame. This is a free event for you to attend. E1 Solutions will be attending as well, so come and meet the E1 Solutions team.
Yeah, it'll actually be both Alicia and myself, I believe, are set up to attend that. And yeah, very excited.
Yes, as we are finally having a in-person event. We've been planning this since 2018, and it finally gets to happen.
Yep.
All right. Well, we thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon on another Innovia webinar. Take care, everyone. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.